How did a small archipelago on the western edge of Europe, once a mosaic of warring tribes, become the axis of a global empire? The rise of the United Kingdom was not a story of chance, nor of uninterrupted conquest. It was the result of an extraordinary systemic evolution. The gradual fusion of governance, law, economy, and sea power into one of history's most durable machines of state. Across more than 1,000 years, 4 interconnected institutions defined this ascent: administrative continuity, legal insulation of capital, socio-economic mobilization, and sovereign projection. Together, they transformed the British Isles from a fragmented frontier into the first truly global power. Britain's earliest human story begins with transient hunter-gatherers, wandering a landscape still joined to the European mainland. Continuous settlement began only in the Holocene, about 11,000 years ago. The Neolithic and Bronze Age migrations that followed brought immense cultural turnovers, even near-complete population replacements. Britain's early societies were shaped by influx and assimilation. Its history began not with isolation, but with exchange. By the Iron Age, distinct regional identities had formed: the Durotresias in Dorset, the Brigantes in the north, the Iceni in the east. Archaeological evidence from reorganized hill forts hints at emerging political hierarchies, settlements laid out in ordered rows, governed by proto-administrative authority. These were not empires, but their instincts, to structure, to control, to codify, would echo through millennia. Then came Rome. In AD 43, Emperor Claudius ordered the invasion of Britain, establishing an imperial province that would endure nearly 4 centuries. The Romans brought roads, cities and law, the infrastructure of order. An immense network of engineered roads, Fosse Way, Ermine Street, Watling Street, linked military bases to provincial capitals, embedding the concept of centralized governance into British soil. Even after Roman political control collapsed in the 5th century, these arteries endured. Many remain modern highways today, the first layer of the nation's administrative skeleton. The next phase arrived with the Anglo-Saxons, whose kingdoms, Wessex, Mercia, Northumbria, replaced the Latin world with a Germanic tongue and culture. They introduced a system of shires, hundreds and tithings, a hierarchy of local administration remarkable for its simplicity and reach. Each shire was overseen by a shire reeve, or sheriff. Each hundred managed roughly 100 households. This grassroots bureaucracy, reinforced by vernacular legal codes like that of King Athelbert of Kent, laid the foundation for England's future statecraft. Its emphasis on local custom, folkright, produced a legal philosophy distinct from Rome's written statutes, flexible, communal, and pragmatic. When William of Normandy crossed the Channel in 1066, he found a functioning system and, with shrewd pragmatism, preserved it. That decision, to retain rather than replace Anglo-Saxon administration, gave England a rare gift in medieval Europe: continuity. The Norman conquest remade the aristocracy, but strengthened the state. William I imposed feudal order from the top, but used the existing shire system to project power efficiently. From this synthesis emerged one of history's great inventions: the common law. Law that was common to all England, uniform and precedent-based. Royal justices travelled the realm, issuing writs and judgments that would later become binding precedent. Law ceased to be local custom and became institutional memory. The Crown's courts expanded jurisdiction over land disputes, undermining feudal barons and binding the country under a single legal logic. But this centralization carried risk. A monarch too powerful could destroy the very stability he created. That crisis came to a head in 1215, when rebellious barons forced King John to sign the Magna Carta, the first written constitution in European history. It declared that the king was subject to law, that property could not be seized without due process, that taxation required consent. The Magna Carta transformed royal power into constitutional power, giving England a degree of political security centuries ahead of its continental rivals. Over time, Parliament evolved from royal council to national legislature. By the Glorious Revolution of 1688, power had shifted decisively. The Bill of Rights curtailed monarchical authority and established a constitutional monarchy answerable to Parliament. Political legitimacy now flowed from representation, not divine right. Crucially, this evolution created an environment of predictability, the single most important condition for capital accumulation. Investors could plan, contracts would hold, the state could borrow. England had achieved what few medieval realms ever managed, a strong government that could act, but could not act arbitrarily. With political order secured, Britain turned inward to restructure its economy. The agricultural revolution transformed productivity. New crop rotations, drainage, and selective breeding increased yields dramatically. Between 1700 and 1800, agricultural output outpaced population growth, a feat unheard of in pre-industrial Europe. The enclosure movement was the social engine of this change. Acts of Parliament authorised the privatisation of common land, consolidating small strips into larger, more efficient farms. It was deeply disruptive. Thousands of rural families were displaced, but it created two forces essential to industrialisation: a surplus of food to sustain urban life, and a surplus of labour to power factories. The countryside's loss became the city's gain. Financing this transformation required a new kind of institution. In 1694, the Bank of England was founded to manage government debt and stabilise credit. It soon evolved into the anchor of London's financial supremacy. Bills of exchange, acceptance houses, and rediscounting mechanisms turned London into the world's clearinghouse for trade. By setting the rules of global credit, Britain didn't just participate in commerce, it defined it. Out of this matrix of stability, capital, and labour emerged the Industrial Revolution, the decisive tipping point. Fueled by coal, refined by science, and financed by the city, it turned Britain into the world's workshop. The intellectual foundations were laid by the Scientific Revolution and the Royal Society, which institutionalised empirical research. Figures like Francis Bacon and Isaac Newton created the mindset. James Watt, Richard Arkwright, and George Stephenson applied it. Steam power liberated industry from geography. Factories no longer depended on rivers. Coalfields like those of the Midlands became engines of economic gravity, drawing millions into urban centres. Between 1500 and 1800, the share of England's urban population rose from 7 to 29%. London alone swelled to over 1 million residents. Education too played a pivotal role. The Scottish Enlightenment, driven by accessible universities in Glasgow, Edinburgh and St Andrews, democratised learning and produced generations of engineers, economists and administrators. Knowledge translated seamlessly into innovation. Curiosity became capital. Britain's success was therefore not only mechanical, it was intellectual. Its institutions converted discovery into wealth, theory into empire. Every empire needs arteries of control. For Britain, that was the sea. From the 17th century onward, the Royal Navy became both shield and sword, securing trade routes, enforcing blockades, and guaranteeing Britain's global credit system. As Sir Walter Raleigh famously wrote, "Whosoever commands the sea commands the trade, and consequently the world." The Navy and the City of London functioned symbiotically. Global merchants relied on London's financial markets, which in turn relied on naval supremacy to protect cargoes and colonies. By the mid-19th century, British warships, powered by steam and iron, policed every ocean from Gibraltar to Singapore. The economic doctrine sustaining this expansion was mercantilism, exporting finished goods, importing raw materials, and accumulating bullion through a favourable balance of trade. Colonies were not mere possessions, they were cogs in a global mechanism designed to enrich the metropole. Enterprises like the East India Company governed vast territories on behalf of the Crown, combining private capital with public sovereignty. Elsewhere, the British perfected indirect rule, governing through existing local structures with minimal administrative cost, an empire built on efficiency as much as force. The transformation of the British Isles into a global hegemon was not a single revolution, but a series of interlocking systemic shifts. Administrative continuity, legal restraint, economic mobilization, industrial innovation, and maritime projection. Each phase reinforced the next. The Shire and the Sheriff evolved into bureaucratic order. The Magna Carta birthed property rights. The Enclosures and Bank of England created labour and capital. The Royal Society and Watt's steam engine converted knowledge into production, and the Royal Navy secured it all under the Pax Britannica. By the 19th century, Britain had achieved a level of global integration unprecedented in human history. Its ships carried goods, its laws underpinned trade, and its currency served as the world's reserve of trust. The story of Britain, then, is not merely imperial, it is systemic. A civilization that learned, across centuries, that power endures not through conquest alone, but through institutions strong enough to adapt and laws wise enough to restrain. That, more than any battle or monarch, is the true engine of the United Kingdom's ascent from nomadic periphery to global major player.